Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I want to thank particularly Congressman Brady for helping to pull together this event today. Also want to thank others of my colleagues who are here. Leader McConnell is going to be here momentarily. The ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, Senator Hatch, our leader on the committee, is here. Representative McIntyre is here. And my congresswoman from the state of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, who has some interesting personal, real-life insights on this particular issue, is here as well. And Kenny Marchand is here as well. And Dean Heller, where did Dean go? Oh, Dean did make it in. But I also want to thank the various business organizations that are represented here today. We have with us the Family Business Estate Tax Coalition, the Family Business Coalition, and the Policy and Taxation Group. I want to thank them for all their support and their work in helping us advance this issue, and you're going to be hearing from some representatives from some of those organizations later. And finally, I need to thank John Kyle, who is no longer here in the Senate, but was the leader on death tax repeal during his time in the United States Senate, and those of us who are still here are trying to take up that mantle and make sure that we continue the fight to repeal the death tax once and for all. Let me just say very briefly by way of introduction before I yield to some of my colleagues here that we don't believe death ought to be a taxable event. If you look at what families go through when they're in a grieving process, it's really ironic that we penalize and punish them through the tax code after they've worked really hard over a lifetime to build up some equity, some assets that they hope to be able to pass on to the next generation. Imposing a tax rate as high as 40% is just not bad for our economy. It's unfair to those families who have saved and built literally for generations, and they're creating jobs out there at the same time they're doing that. Currently, 70% of small businesses fail in the second generation and 90% fail in the third generation. A CBO report released in 2009 said that 1/3 of family businesses who owed the estate tax, the death tax, actually owed more in taxes than they had in liquid assets. So that kind of tells you what families are up against when they get hit with this tax. And that's certainly the case in the Midwest, in my home state of South Dakota, where we've seen land values go up in the last 5 years by 50%. And so you've got an awful lot of farm and ranch operators that are land rich and cash poor, and end up getting stuck with the death tax, and makes it very difficult for them to keep that in the family. And they end up, in many cases, having to liquidate some of those assets in order to pay the IRS. We don't think that's fair. We think that we ought to give family farmers and ranchers and small business people, those who work hard to build up that over a lifetime, the opportunity to pass that on to the next generation. And so getting rid of the death tax once and for all would enable us to do that. And so that's what we're here to talk about today, and the legislation that we've introduced here in the Senate and that Kevin has introduced in the House, we hope to get the opportunity to move in the not too distant future.